Alright, another example of HTTP requests. In this one, what I have is two different pages that I've built. The first page, the one we're looking at now, is called Select Colors. The second page I have is called Show Colors. And what I would like to do is I would like to set this up so that the user has the option on the Select Colors page of being able to pick a foreground and a background color, and then when they submit this form, I would like them to be taken over to the Show Colors page where we can then see the foreground and the background colors that they selected. So for starters, over here on the Select Color page, I've started off by giving the user a form. I have that form set up so that its action is the Show Colors page, so that's the page the data will be submitted to, and I've said that I'm going to submit this data using a POST request. Inside the form, I've put together two paragraphs. Inside each of the paragraphs, I've put in a label, one for foreground color, the other one has a label for background color, and of course a submit button down at the bottom. So, what would be the easiest way for us to be able to let the user pick colors? One possibility might be to use a text field. So let's see, if I put in a text field, I'm going to call this one the FG for its name, FG for foreground color. The second text field I would put in for background color. This one I'll call BG, background color. If I take a look at that in my browser, that's what it looks like right now. Nothing fancy, but I have a way for the user to enter a foreground color and enter a background color. If I wanted to go ahead and make use of those colors, then over on the Show Color page, I would do that by being able to extract the values from the POST request. Since I'm going to be changing colors, let me do that using some CSS. I'm going to put some style tags up in the head section of my document. And up there I'm going to say for the body, let's set the color to one thing, and I'll say let's set the background color to another thing. Here where the color goes, I'll put in some PHP tags and I'll say echo from the POST request the value for FG, the foreground color. And here where the background color goes, a set of PHP tags, and I will say echo from the POST request the value for the background color. Hopefully it'll be just that easy. Let's go see if it works. Back over in my web browser for the foreground color, let me change that to, let's just reverse the colors. Let me say the foreground color is going to be white and the background color is going to be black. There we go. When I submit the form, we're taken over to the second page where is everything? Oh, it's there. It looks like I had a white foreground color. What did happen here? White foreground color, but my background color, oh, I know what it is. It's conflicting with some other CSS I have. Let me go back over to my Show Color page and let me comment out my other custom CSS. There we go. That gives us a little bit better idea of what's going on. So here, white foreground color, black background color, just the way we were supposed to get. All right, let me click my Select New Colors. That takes me back to my Select Colors page. And let's try something different. For the foreground color, let's try red. For the background color, let's try yellow. There we go. That seems to work just fine. So overall, that seems to function, my little style sheet problem aside. And everything seems okay. What happens though if the user mistypes something? Like you might have noticed a minute ago, I tried to set the foreground color to white, and when I went to change the background color, I almost typed back, a little typo there. Well, that obviously causes a bit of a problem where my text is white, my background color on the other hand did not change, it's just defaulting to white because I gave it a color name that it didn't recognize. It doesn't recognize BACK as a valid color name. Is there a way that we could potentially avoid that problem? Well, sure. What if, instead of giving the user text fields, what if we gave them some other kind of control that let them pick their background or their foreground and background colors instead? Possibly what we could do is here in the form, instead of using a text field, which is just so uncontrolled and wide open, the user can enter anything, right or wrong, what if we put in something that was a little bit more constrained? What if we put in a set of radio buttons, for example? Let's see what that would look like. There. This is something like what I could do if I wanted to use radio buttons instead. What I've done here with the radio buttons is I've put in 4 radio buttons for the foreground color and 4 more for the background color. For each one of them, I've set the type of the input field to radio. I've given it the name that matches. Notice all the radio buttons for foreground color have the same name, FG, and all the radio buttons for background color have the same name, BG. For each one, I've then given it an individual value. That's the value that will actually be submitted to the server if that's the selected radio button when the form is submitted. I've given each one of them a unique ID. Remember that it's required that IDs be unique within a page. So unlike name, where it's okay for all of the radio buttons in a group to have the same name, they cannot have the same ID. I've also, with each one of my radio button groups, picked one to start off as the default by marking it as checked. So I've selected black, I'm even talking in typos today. I've selected black as the default foreground color, and I've selected white as the default background color. When I go take a look at that in the browser, this is what it actually looks like. Now, of course, here I could still give the user quite a few different radio buttons in each one of those 2 groups. Let's see if it actually works. I'll do blue and green. Ooh, lovely. You see why I teach programming and not design? Let me try selecting something else. Let's try selecting white and orange. There we are. So it still seems to work fundamentally just like it did before, but we've more carefully constrained exactly what the user is allowed to pick and not allowed to pick. At this point, we don't have to worry nearly so much about the user doing simple things like making typos. The only real drawback maybe here from using radio buttons is that if I did want to present a lot of options, radio buttons tend to take up a lot of room. You have to be able to see all of the radio buttons that are available all at the same time. If I maybe wanted to give the user another way of being able to pick colors, but maybe to do it in a slightly more in a way that's slightly more conservative as far as the page space is concerned. Maybe instead of using radio buttons, what I could do is I could use select components instead. Let's see what that might look like. This is what it might look like when it comes to select components. The select components in code are not necessarily any shorter than it was to write the radio buttons, but in some ways it is a little bit simpler, not having to worry about giving entire groups of options names and things like that. If I come over and take a look at it in the browser, this is what we actually see. Right? Using these select components, I would be able to give the user a much larger range of different possible options for them to pick from, but I would be able to do it in a way that when the control wasn't actually in use, would not take up a tremendous amount of room on the page itself. Let's see how it works. Let me pick green for my foreground color, and let's pick yellow for the background color. It still works the same way it did before. So hopefully you kind of get the idea that when we're dealing with requests that are coming in from a form on the server, it's generally fairly easy to deal with, accessing get or post values one way or the other. At this point, where a lot of the options actually come in is how we choose to present options to the user for them to be able to pick from. Sometimes you can make the user's life a lot easier when possible by choosing a good component, a more appropriate component, but sometimes we'll end up having to do slightly fancier techniques, fancier things in situations where we're not able to use a component that maybe makes life a little bit easier for the user.